Hello, welcome to Low-Code Campfire. This is episode number 184 for February 28, 2025, last day of the month. Today we'll talk about, we'll do a little bit of exploration of our beefree integration at client request, assuming client shows up. But beyond that, we'll talk about whatever you want to. This is our um, weekly event where we get together, talk about Plant an App and the challenges and challenges we face, techniques we use to overcome them, and we encourage you to participate. And this is a friendly group that all skill levels are welcome. We do this once a week. We record them and put them out on YouTube so you can get to them and play them back, maybe use them to get to sleep by, I don't know, but youtube.com/plantanap will get you there. We run this agenda where we say hello and then we go around the campfire. We always start with first call on anything that got submitted in advance. And then beyond that, we'll take a tour of some of our other topics. After an hour or so, we turn off the recording and just hang out for a few more minutes afterwards. We call that afterglow. So do that with us. You can jump in, show and tell, use your chat window, raise your hand, but we do encourage you to participate. You can submit questions and topics in advance by using this QR code or emailing me at support@plantanap.com. I forgot to mention, I guess I say email me, but I am Dale Warner, head of support for Plant an App. We also have Patrick Anderson, technical support manager for Plant an App. So we're here and available to talk to you. And with that, I will say hello, and I feel like I stumbled through that, but oh well.
Hello, Dale. Hello, everybody.
Right.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
So when I come in here to do this, I say to my wife, I'm going to go out and play with my internet friends. Do you have a way that you refer to this group? That's all right.
My wife
Any
knows you guys as the campfire guys.
the campfire
I said I was muted, but I said campfire crew.
campfire crew. Fair enough. Sounds like rubble and crew, but that's my grandson playing in there. Okay, so first call. Anybody come with something we wanted to talk about beyond the topic that Matt submitted in advance? Right, we'll just dive into them then. Matt was interested in exploring our beef-free integration, and that's a little bit of a challenge for me. I know we have one, and I haven't played with it. I did load it up so that we could look into it and see what's there, and maybe deduce what it's all about. Matt, do you want to do any setup before I just dive in on this?
Yes, happy to. Good morning, everybody. So what I'm trying to do is uh, upgrade the email communications in one of the systems that I'm working on. And right now, predominantly text, and I've run into a number of things trying to take the text only. Well, it's actually HTML, but it's pretty basic, and make it look a little spiffier. So I've run into problems with I wanted to put a table in the email, and that's not working as expected. When I send the existing email out to a Gmail client, for some reason, Gmail decides that everything after a certain point needs to be in purple text, which is interesting. The table that I built, when I grabbed the HTML, put it in HTML tidy, it displays 3 entries in the table formatted as expected. When I send it to Outlook, it comes in with one of the 3 displaying, and there's huge gaps in space. When I send the same thing to Gmail, that comes in with a table that I should say it's Google's interpretive design of what I thought my table should be. It's more like a Picasso.
Mm.
So that led me to say, okay, I want to up the game. A lot of it has to do with branding and so on and so forth, with some additional capability. Now, I've played a lot with, used MailChimp quite a bit, Constant Contact a fair amount. And so this leads me to beefree. Um, and I'm wondering at the top level, number one is is there anybody in the group that's has a level of expertise with email generation from the system? The issue is that I can't go with um, completely stock emails. Otherwise, I just go to MailChimp, do a MailChimp integration, and be done with it. These emails change from client to client, and we're not the ones controlling the changes. We're trying to have to put the changes in the hands of the quote unquote consultants that we work with. So there you run into, people cutting and pasting in Word docs and really taking a hammer to the HTML, amongst other things. So I'm trying to say, okay, what can I do that's reasonable, that will improve the branding, maintain some level of consistency. Also, there's a security element where if we go using the integration, say with MailChimp or Constant Contact, that, if I'm not mistaken, if it's like other integrations I've worked with, you're basically pushing the list of folks that you want to send the email over to Constant Contact and then triggering Constant Contact to actually send the email. That raises an issue of privacy and confidentiality that I'd rather, just not go there for a variety of reasons. So that's and I can show you guys examples of all of this mayhem that I've created, and get your insights on any and all if you have anything meaningful. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. What I'd love to see is beefree, and this may be, shooting for the moon here, or something like it, something that comes when you do the integration, comes inside of the Plant and App umbrella, or is it simply a push of data out to beefree?
Well, so thanks for setting us up. That's a lot. Um,
Yes, it is. We can pick anyone and start wherever you. Beefree is or something like that. Let's put it that way, is the ultimate. In the meantime, I'm dropping back and saying, okay, let's just make a halfway decent formatted HTML email. And I'm pretty much there. I've got some, the purple on Gmail is an issue, so I've got to figure that out. So we can go
so
wherever you'd like.
well, maybe I'll just start by relating some experience with some of the projects that I've been part of and where I've been told to go and might help. First of all, recently Bogdan expressed an interest in us being able to send through beefree, and so for example, the mechanism where you assemble the custom pieces of the email in data, maybe a JSON format and push it to beefree against a template that's predefined, ready to accept and do that mail merge and do that. Um, and so this is kind of where the part where you said, I know that these mailing services will do that, but it raises security it has privacy implications.
Mhm.
And so we're weighing that against, for example, sending them internally. The most recent series of newsletters that we've been sending out over the last couple of months have been where we designed a beefree template, imported it into Plantain App, and let Plantain App do the work of mailing them. And
Most interesting.
and and what we've done there, I'd be happy to share techniques. Um, I developed a process of being able to export the template from beefree, import it into um, what our Q emailer for anybody who's followed along over the years, and then it's ready to import and ready to send. The experience that we had with that is that most of the variation from people who received that was controlled. It looked there was a difference or two in Outlook, but it looked good on a narrow format. It looked good in Gmail. It looked good in Outlook. It was just some minor variation that I would have lived with no problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it on the there's always a ledger. On the negative side of that ledger was that um, our software was doing all the work of doing the merge. It wasn't particularly fast. We also our software was doing the work of um, converting links that were in the email into trackable links so
Mm-hmm.
that we can tell who's interested in what and when our marketing emails go out. We're responsible for managing the opt-outs. And so you take on by bringing it inside, you take on a certain responsibility for things that these mailing services are doing already.
Yeah.
And I so actually I am now going to backtrack a little bit. The state we're in, we're sending emails from Plantain app using send email, and they look good.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving towards. I said be free, but I believe it's actually SendGrid that we're looking at being able to do the merge and letting SendGrid do all the work. But the point is trying to find trying to use another service to take care of a lot of the heavy lifting of getting the email out. So uh, I guess the short answer is we don't have it figured out. Um, there isn't a perfect solution from my perspective.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll hear from more.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you're kind of wrestling with the same thing that I'm wrestling with, because two heads are better than one for sure. So that's all good. So does anybody else use the system to push emails out, and what's kind of your experience with it, and how are you doing it? That would be, if anybody has any input, that would be great.
Ben is being polite again today. Please jump in.
Hello. I can't really, speak obviously for how this works compared to what you're doing. I mean, I send out emails all the time, but many, many moons ago, I created a template manager, which allows me to create templates for emails as well as for PDFs. So what I basically do is I create a template for whatever emails the system typically sends out. And then I have a workflow or a set of actions, basically, that I would basically say, this is the template I want to use. Here are because the template that I create can have variable parameters in it. These are the parameters to fill in place of the tokens that are found inside that template. And this is the email address it's sending to, all the pieces that are needed. And then it goes and compiles everything and just sends out the email. I've never had an issue with the formatting of emails. They go out to people all over the place, whether it be Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook people, whatever. And they all seem to be working fine. But at the same token, I'm the one that's pretty much fully controlling the template. and the actual HTML code that's going out. In very rare cases do I utilize rich text boxes for the clients, mainly because any type of rich text box, if you paste from things like, for example, Word, you're going to get a complete and utter mess usually, because copying from Word has a whole slew of other CSS classes and stylings and stuff like that. And sometimes it will reference CSS styles that don't come along with the copy paste.
Mhm.
And that causes problems because then the CSS doesn't actually exist in the receiver's email. So then all of a sudden, certain formattings don't render correctly.
Yeah.
So I try to avoid that whole rich text thing, because, like I said, it does allow people to do that copy paste, and that tends to be problematic. So for the most part, I just give them straight out text boxes. And I purposely, in some cases, because I've seen them try to be sneaky, I would strip out even any HTML found inside it, just to be sure that my HTML is not being compromised, and the data that I'm injecting is just straight text.
Yep. Yeah, that's admirable and ultimately probably quite functional, which is great. Um, so to your point, I'm looking for that balance between um, the ability to make things that look good and look good across platforms, and then also allowing the um, customer to put in content. Now, in your case, you're limiting it to straight text, which is great, but I don't necessarily have that luxury. I've got to probably provide more. And we're evolving this whole thing as we go, so it's a bit in flux. But right now, the expectation is that they have the ability to, create pretty much custom emails, which, at some point that we may need to back that off because of the issues it causes. So I'm trying to find the right balance between those two things. I do have a question. I did go out like Dale's on beefree, and I went out and I just picked one of their standard templates. Then I did an export and looked at the HTML, and there's a fair amount of, like in the header section, there's a significant amount of styling that goes along and some references to, of course, Google fonts, but also an XML Office document settings, which is interesting, and also the schemas dash Microsoft colon VML, and some Office references in there. Is there anybody who's experienced or has kind of something in their pocket that says, okay, here's the kind of the core things you want to do in terms of before you do the setup of the email and so on and so forth? Anybody? Sounds like maybe Ben, you might have gotten to that point, but do you guys even know what I'm talking about?
I'll say something. I've looked into this as well, and in the research that I did, it kept saying, go back in time, format your emails as if it was going to be rendered in Word as HTML or in their HTML mode 10 years ago, because that's what Outlook is using to render, and it has to be old. So the advice I saw said do a lot with tables because the table formatting was understood then, and keep it very simple. So unfortunately, I know that doesn't help very much because you're trying to make your stuff look good, and that's not necessarily conducive to that. Or shall we say, you have to work a lot harder to get it there if you're
Yeah.
working with tables.
Yeah. Like Dale just had that be free design up on screen, and I that right there, if I bet you if he exported that and took a look at the HTML, all those things um, are tables underneath the hood. And to your point, Mark, that's what was my experience when I looked at um, exporting the one from, in this case, Be Free. There was tables all over the place, and they were defining styles right down to the row. So row 16, column 1 has a style, row 16, column 2 has a style, and that's a level of specificity that I wasn't necessarily
It's a bit
anticipating, but
painful. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It is. But
And also what I read also was that it's better to do inline styles instead of doing styles at the top or the bottom or anywhere else, which which is a whole bunch more styling.
yep, but
I
that
do
too
have
lines up with what I've experienced.
yeah, yeah. I do have, I think, some input on what you said earlier about Outlook does its own interpretation of your tables.
Hmm.
Um, with things not necessarily even lining up, I've noticed. And I think that I have noticed, well, I know that I've noticed that that was caused in the plant and app send email action. There's a setting right next to to and CC and BCC. There's one that says format.
Hmm. Yep.
The two choices are HTML, text, and HTML. Um, the first one, HTML, and replace new line with a break. That's the default, unfortunately. And so when you have that default in place, when you send an email, it's going to put a break in between each line, including your cells of your table, which makes them go all kind of wonky. So you got to change that format to HTML.
Okay.
I,
Thank you.
I
That's
I
a
will second
good tip.
that with what Mark just said. I never use that whole automatic break thing. I always flip it to HTML.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the default because it gets me so many times.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go
Getting
back
you.
and check my defaults. Um,
The setting is called format.
yeah, let me just see where that is.
But while you're doing that, I'll say that I'm glad you brought up this topic for discussion, and I'm glad that we're all working on it and looking at it now. And because I am also going in the same direction where I can make basic emails, obviously, but there I have some needs on making them prettier,
Hmm.
more formatted, more rich,
Yep.
and I'm happy to be investigating that with you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. So there you have the setting on screen. Thank you, Dale. So the third choice is what we want to do in this case.
I think so.
And,
Yeah, that's what I
and
always choose.
I would say in most cases that would be the answer.
Because
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll plus one that as well. I do that too. I want to throw one last thing in, and that is I've been formatting emails to try to look better, and I've used divs many times. So the old systems know divs. You just need to set the width because most of the old time emails were a width of 600, and I've just kept it to that.
Hmm.
Um, and use divs and with a width of 600 and a margin of auto, and that's looked good in old Outlook as well as most other email systems.
Making some notes here.
So basically, we can blame all of our troubles on Outlook because it's using an old version of Word HTML to render everything.
Microsoft in general.
So this was the HTML output when I exported from beefree, and you had mentioned along the way that there's these row level CSS. It is, it's all brought in here and works so that you end up with a template very specific to, excuse me, an HTML is very specific to the template, and you start rearranging things. So beefree does a lot of the work for you to make it look very pretty, but it's not. I when I originally started working with the beefree exports, I was expecting to find things that were, blocks that I could use.
Hmm.
And what I find is that they're so specific to that particular template that it's very hard to reuse them in the way that I was hoping to with uh, putting certain pieces of it in tokens, so that if, for example, if there was a particular layout that you liked and you could grab that piece and um, make it be repeatable um, wherever you wanted in the email, that was what my hope. But what I found was that you can't, because it's all keyed to what row it lives on.
Mm,
So,
which is pretty
it-
wild in 2025.
so for whatever it's worth, what I built was that we have a template in beefree. Beefree is nice among other things because you can do this wherever it is. This preview in different devices. So you see this desktop mode looks this way, and the mobile mode looks this way, and so you can get to see these different format devices. And again, across the different things that we tested, it was very Google Outlook. Um, I mean, Gmail Outlook. It was a handheld device. Looked very good fidelity to the item, to the original send.
Hmm.
So then, from using their export with get HTML and images, um, which is what we were looking at there um,
Download. Yeah.
in that one. But it gave me all the images as well. And so what I built in our communications program was, where did it go? Here, this one. So this is within Plant and App, you can see I've imported this item, and you can see that the body visually looks very close to what was, or actually looks very good relative to the original. What I have is an import. The import logic from beefree opens the zip that you get. It grabs the HTML from that folder, and then it imports all the images into something that into a folder on your site that then the beefree can reference. Um, the template can be pointing to those images. So it handles the HTML and the images.
Hmm.
And so the end result is that you have all of it on your site, but the design, edit, grunt work was done on beefree. And then um, we can merge into this as well, dropping a name into the template, for example. So
Hmm.
putting after the fact, maybe going back and putting some tokens into the so I'd be happy to share that if it's of any value to you.
Mm. Yes, I'm sure it would be. That would be great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mm.
I just finished hand coding an HTML, not for an email, but for a PDF to recreate a form. I've said this numerous times, governments love forms. So um, I've had to lay it all out, and they want it exactly the way that the form looks like, that they've printed and faxed to people for years. And I had to lay it out with divs and with percentages and with tables and um, all that stuff, and then drop tokens in, because what I'm doing, of course, is using Plan an App to create an online form. The person fills it all in, hits submit, and it generates a PDF with all that information in the format that that they want to receive, and then sends it to them. But I've done emails the same way, um, where the email is dressed up fancy, and they received a fancy email. And then also it's great for customers who, once you fill out the submission and then you send an email back to the customer saying, hey, you just filled out this form and this is what you gave us. And, that should look nice too, branding and all.
Hmm. Yep. Mm.
Cool.
So I'm recollecting that one of my first projects in the web uh, 25 years ago that was completely unrelated to obviously to Plant and App and DNA and Sharp tools. That PDF has or had a merge language where you can take the data from a PDF and have it be completely separate from the PDF, and so you could have a PDF template that had fields in it and merge the fields into the PDF and produce a final output. And I haven't looked for that technique in decades, but it would seem like it would be much easier if you could take a government PDF and put fields on it. So rather than redesigning the form in trying to redo it in HTML, if you started with PDF, worked in Adobe, being able to put fields where you need them, and then merge the data might be an easier process. But whether or not that's still possible, I don't know. Make any sense? If you sometimes you go onto a site and you'll find a fillable PDF where you can tab right to the fields where you want to fill them in, and you can fill them in and print them. So it's that kind of a setup, and then you name the fields, and there is a merge functionality within Adobe. But then you got to figure out how to trigger Adobe to do that merge. So it was it's both possible, but maybe more trouble than it's worth. I don't know.
I remember doing that. Don't you need Adobe Acrobat Pro to initially set that up?
I think so, and at the time, I think I set that up on the server that was on the web server so that I could call it externally and say, here's my template, here's my data, please merge these, and it would come up with a file at the other end. It was
I did that also, and it worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a bit of trouble to set it all up, but it worked.
Yeah, I do something similar with an LMS that I work with a couple actually, that it's the certificate filling in who completed, when they completed, and what they completed. So, and it's pulling, dynamic data. So, yes. And I use Nitro PDF. I don't even know if it's still in existence, but my copy works. So. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sorry if I took up so much time, but very helpful. Thank you.
So it appears to still be in existence. So something to investigate if you had that problem. I don't know whether it's, at least it's around. All right. Good topic. Let's, first of all, I think we've arrived at second call. And so if there's anybody that this has sparked another topic we can go out to, other than that, I think we have some other things I can bring up. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We had a campfire contribution from one of our internal team. We are in the process of, in our next version, 127, that we have an installer that's aimed at helping people that have used the older DNA and Sharp tools to get Plant and App installed. And then one of the things that came up from that was that we have people that are running older versions of our action form, for example, that have the old date and time fields. I don't remember what the thing underneath them was, but at some point we converted to flat picker. And so this workflow goes through and converts all of your date, time, the older versions to flat picker. It doesn't solve every problem. You still might have to investigate, but one of the sites we were testing had 300 different instances of using the old daytime field whether it was 300 forms or just 100 forms with a lot of dates on them, I don't know, but would have been a very manual process to convert them all. So anyway, if you encounter that, if you're upgrading an older site, that Migrate Date Pickers is a tool that you can put into the arsenal. Comments?
That's
All right.
great. Glad to see it.
Yeah, one more thing in the list. So there was quite a bit of activity over the last couple of weeks on community forum that might be of interest. And we can dive into any or all of these, but let's see. I invested a little time in this one, and it's just probably a good reminder about caching. Every time I don't think I answered this user's question about caching. I went and I didn't quite understand what the point that he was making, so I'm not sure I solved his issue, but it was interesting turning on caching and then setting it up, or excuse me, setting up an instance where you're resolving a token a million times or however many it takes to start getting some significant results, and then turning on caching and seeing the difference. And in this case, what I did is I was trying to compare the core get or session token. Session is evidently very fast. A million resolutions of just without caching, just trying to return a session token was a million times took 75 seconds. But then I did a database token and turned on caching at the user session level, and a million iterations was 148 seconds. So caching, when you turn that on and when it applies, I mean, it is incredibly fast. So rather than redoing the work of the database token, having to go out and find that in the database, and sometimes some of those tokens can take I mean, some of the work that you can ask a database token or a Razor token or whatever to do could take multiple seconds to accomplish. It's really up to the difficulty of whatever it is that you're trying to get it to do. But once you turn caching on, all that, once it has a result, the processing goes away. So yeah, anytime I've explored using the caching, if you can use it, if it works, it's very fast. Anybody have comments about token caching or API caching?
I have a question, I guess, with regard to the user session caching. If I go turn that level caching on and I retrieve a value, that's good for just that user, just that session. And then if Mark comes in, uses the system, accesses the token, his value is different than mine and cached as well.
That's the intention.
And it doesn't affect or destroy mine or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you set it, just a reminder, when you set a caching, when you create a token like that, you say you're doing user session caching and a duration. I can't remember if it's in milliseconds or seconds, but you see, so the first time that you access that token, it does the underlying work, and then up through until the cache expires, if you request that exact same token with the exact same parameters, for example, if you're using token params to pass in something specific to that database, what record ID or whatever, that's part of the caching. So if you ask for a different record ID, you get a different result that is computed. But yeah, for the duration of the cache, it's served from cache, which could be a performance benefit. You just have to know that if you were expecting a change to the value, it wouldn't happen. So, for example, if you have a database token that retrieves record A and returns the name, and it lasts for a minute, and then you do a database operation that changes the name of that record, and then you use the token again within that 60 seconds, it's going to show the old value instead of the new value because it doesn't go out to the database, it does it from cache. And then 60 seconds, when that timer expires, next time you use the token, it's going to go out to the database and you get the name change. So it's very important to understand what the benefit of the caching is, but also what the result is. If you need fresh, current, up to the minute data, you can't use a cached token. But if you
Is there any way with that user cache token to say, in your case where you said, okay, you've changed the database, the cache doesn't change, can you like force it to go get a new one?
you have to think about the mechanism you're going to use to force. So, for example, like we've been talking about browser cache in the weeks past, where you pass it a date token on the query string so that it triggers the browser cache, makes the browser go out and actually query the site. You could include a version parameter in your token that you normally don't. You start with version 1, for example, and you don't use it as part of the query to the database. But if you realize that you've done something in your system that requires that you flush the cache, that you could increment your version, and then at that point it would the fact that you have something different on the token would force it to recompute.
Okay.
And so perhaps another way, another use of that would be that let's say that you made a change to the database, and on the screen following that, you always display information using a token. Perhaps those tokens include a date and time in the token structure so that it always forces an update, versus every other use in the site, it doesn't matter. The information isn't changing. You just have to evaluate and think about what is caching appropriate in this circumstance, and will it save me time versus confusion.
We found out, Dale, that we use Cloudflare to cache Planet Marketing's website, and we found out that we were having problems like with images. People would upload a new profile image, and it would still look the same as the other one, obviously. So what we did was we grabbed the core token ticks and said, okay, we'll add this on to the query string. So when it goes to get the image and it's ticks : now, so we would have like just X, let's say, like on the query string, in other words, question mark X equals ticks
Now, yep.
now. And since that was on the end of the image, it would force the image to update to the new image the person uploaded.
Yes. So long as it's different, that it gets past whatever the caching mechanism is. So if the file name is exactly the same, that's a challenge. One, another technique is that when a file gets uploaded, that you attach it. You get a GUID attached to it, and so the file name isn't identical, and then it's not an issue. It will load properly. But if it's the same and no, you don't do something like the technique you mentioned, then browsers might cache the old value. Before we go on from this one, this community forum question, it did bring up the issue that that tokens can be used to store values, which is, I mean, part of what we all struggled with, and we've talked about this stuff before, that you want to be able to keep some transient values, and whether you have to put them somewhere. They're either on the query string or in a database or in session or in cookie. There's places that you can keep values so that you, as the low-code developer, website designer, can figure out how to, what's the context of this question? Are we talking about user A or user B? Are we talking about record 1 or record 2? And so you can store that in different places. But there's some confusion sometimes with tokens, trying to assign a value to a token and how long that lives. And essentially, I mean, I'm trying to list, and you guys have more experience, I think, than I do on this stuff, but trying to get it out here on the record for anybody following behind. You can put values on the query string, which can then be used by get or query string token. You can store a value in session, which is then so that you could use, for example, set session to store it and then session to retrieve it. There's but it's transient. It might get reset, whether it's in 20 minutes or 2 days, but the session will disappear on you, so that's a problem. There's cookie, which is on the browser, which is great, pretty dependable, but the user can see it and can edit it, so that has its own set of things. So but I guess the main confusion I'm trying to address is aside from those specific ones, there isn't a way to store values in using tokens that are durable. You have to, and then there was the whole data locker thing that I did one time that was basically putting the data in, using tokens to put the data into and get the data out of an entity structure, which is very durable, but it comes at the cost of having to build something. So anyway, I guess the core thing was, again, hard to set tokens that are just durable by default and doing what you think they're going to do. You can't say, set this token to this value. Comments on that one? Okay. I think this was a Ben contribution or question. Do I have that right? Yep, Ben. Ben, do you want to dive in on this one at all?
I mean, it was pretty straightforward. It was just an issue with the action forms when you're utilizing Bootstrap 5. The preserve layout is actually a superfluous option. It has no effect on the system. Everything is always in preserve layout, so you can't turn it off. And that's pretty much it. That's just apparently the new behavior moving forward with BS5.
Okay. And now I recall we did talk about this one last week. So
Yeah, that was where Bogdan basically said that that's the new BS5 way of doing things with what you guys are using. So expecting the same behavior as BS3 is not going to happen. The form fields will not snap to the left.
but I do appreciate, I see that there was a comment from Mark about using visibility hidden as a way to show, but they still occupy space. So yep, that's okay.
Couldn't you set their width to be 0
Ooh,
if
interesting.
they
I don't
had
think
an
so.
identifiable something to them?
I don't think that would apply.
I honestly don't know for two reasons. Number one, because I'm not really sure what kind of grid they're using in the BS5 layout and whether those grid cells themselves will already have a width assigned to them. But outside of that, the only way to really accomplish that would be JavaScript, and I'm trying to avoid that. I just wanted to use what was already built into the system, preserve layout. If you check it, it preserves it. If it's unchecked, which is the default, it should have snapped to the left. I just wanted to let anybody else know that if you're expecting that type of behavior with BS5, don't, because that's just not the way action form now behaves when utilizing BS5. It's always going to be with the assumption of preserve layout, and there's no way around it. There's no option to turn that off.
So, Matt, you have your hand up.
I do actually. Yeah, so this is one thing that I submitted on the community forum. Interestingly enough, a server reboot made that issue go away. It was not a big issue, it was more cosmetic than anything. I don't know if you put it on screen if you have any comments, but then I also have something else after.
Okay, well, server reboot making this issue go away. I have seen this. So let me make sure I understand. We go to configuration and pages, and we're doing a new page,
Yep.
and that these come up with some weird
Yep.
content. What you say, it's data source view prop doesn't exist. And you said that a full system reboot made that symptom go away.
Yes, or so it appeared anyway. I just came in the next day and looked at, tried to make a page. That's gone.
So I've seen this in again, transient, haven't tracked it down, and I know Patrick has worked in this area. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but I don't know if you've seen that symptom before, Patrick. If he's available to talk either. So,
What's the symptom again? I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment.
sure. You're adding a new page and you get data source view prop doesn't exist in these text boxes. And so it's a little like we're trying to initialize this with something and something's broken. And Matt says he did a server reboot that solved it. I suspect maybe an IIS reset would solve it, but there's something transient going on in here. And so maybe as much as I'm going to say is this is not an indication that you're crazy. I've seen it too.
Yeah, I have seen that too, and I'm not sure the exact circumstance that it happens, but I think that Ben just pointed out something that your login could have possibly timed out, maybe.
Yeah, no, not maybe other times,
No?
yes, but not in this case because the page added just fine. I just ignored
Okay.
it and kept going, and it worked just fine. So
Yeah, just so you know, I have seen where even though you are auto logged out, some commands will still execute. And
Okay.
it's not until you really do like a full page refresh that you get bumped back to the login screen. So it's kind of like you're almost in limbo, in a medium limbo area where you're like half logged in, half not. Like you're literally not logged in. So when it tries to grab certain information, it'll come back with an error saying that these properties or whatever are missing because you're not logged in, you don't have the right to view it. But then other actions, like if there's a button on the page that you still haven't refreshed the page yet, so you haven't gotten shoved to the login page, when you hit the button, some of those actions, sometimes I've seen it happen, will still actually run.
Yep.
Not, and the other thing too is that sometimes those actions will run, but not completely. Like some of them in the stack won't work, others will. So if you have certain actions that are expecting previous actions to have done certain things, and those actions did not run because you got auto logged out, you're gonna have some very, very funky things happen. I've had situations where like some records were updated, others weren't, or some fields were, or others weren't because in that action stack, certain things didn't run because I got auto logged out and other things did run. It's
Hmm.
very weird. But I have seen it happen. Don't ask me for the details of what runs and doesn't run because I never went that deep into figuring it out. I just realized after I did a page refresh, I got kicked off into the login page. I'm like, that's why it just acted, wonky.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, in my case, I was fully logged in and, even refreshing the page and so on and so forth, still came up with that same notation on the screen. Like I said, it did not affect it functionally. It was just curious, is there something underlying with my system that I should be either fixing or checking or something, but maybe not.
Maybe we can call this one a be on the lookout if anybody sees this and has any clues about it. We'd love to hear it. We'll be on the lookout for it as well. So you said you had something else that you
Yes. Yeah, and you guys might have talked about this last week, and I apologize I wasn't able to be here last week. Um, did you mention at all Patrick's contribution to Campfire last week?
I don't think we did. And actually, I was going to mention that earlier.
I assumed
Um,
he had that on the week that he took.
no, I did it afterwards.
Uh,
Yeah, it was something that came up during that campfire call, and
great.
Yeah, actually,
Well, that's this one.
yeah. So we talked about updating records dynamically while you're editing them with an API. And I looked in the week. I thought we had an example on Campfire, but I couldn't find one. So this is just an example of doing that. So as you change your choices on the right, they are being updated in the database through an API automatically.
yeah, it's actually quite cool, quite handy. The the follow-up conversation, Patrick, that we had, I think is important for anybody using this. The security settings on, as I mentioned, I took this example. I worked through it. It worked fine on my system. Then I followed the same process and attempted to do something else, and it didn't work. And as we discovered, it had to do with the permissioning. I think it was OAuth or I forgot JSON permissions, some permission setting that if we eliminated from the string, it actually worked, whereas mine simply wouldn't work in my example. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I think it was that it was originally I think you used the default API, which was using JWT, and we just changed that to make it a little bit simpler to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything specific or because I tried a variety of JWT type authorizations, and is there some kind of method to that madness to get it right? Because this example is using the user permission, if I recall correctly, and
Here I just made this I just made this a public API that's restricted to this domain. That's what I
mhm.
did with this one. Um, so the API can only be called from this domain. Yeah, so there's no restrictions on this one right here. Well, I actually copied the entity API and then made changes to it. That's what I did here.
Patrick, just for fun, can you tell me what I'm supposed to be doing here to make this
Right. So yeah, so I'm sorry, this is only happening on edits. So if you click on the edit icon next to your choices or anybody's choices, it doesn't matter. Yep. And then you change it and that's when you get the update.
Nice.
It could be done on a new one also. It just I ran into, I don't know, a complication. I can't remember what it was, and I thought, well, for this illustration, I'll leave it at just the edit. But I forget what I can't remember now what I was thinking when I decided to make it just edit, but that's what I decided to do.
So on the entree, just for fun, on the entree you have an
Bind expression, yeah.
Bind expression that says go run this API and pass stuff in, and
Yeah, that API key at the end is what we were talking about earlier from a security standpoint.
Oh yeah, and I think that actually maybe in this case where I am now, I don't need that. Oh well, maybe I do because there is permission on the creation of the on the update. So um,
While this is thinking, one of the other things that was, if you've noticed on Patrick's API call, he's got all of the fields, which is just 3, so no big deal, on each API. And one of the things that Patrick and I did was copied the API and then altered the actions. Instead of doing an update the entire record, we just did a partial update. So if you've got, in this case, you've only got 2 fields, no big deal. But in the case of where you have a lot of fields that you're dealing with, you then just do a partial update specific to that field you're working with.
Great. So that's the other, yeah. So I used the just the standard update action, but if we use a partially update, you could where all the parameters aren't required, you could then have it just update that field specifically on each change.
this technique of editing, of using an API to store data is really cool and useful in lots of circumstances. You probably recall that I've been doing some things with mapping, and as people scroll around on their map on their phone, I save the viewport of where they're looking so that when they come back to that map at a later time, the map renders with that information. Point is, you can grab what is going on interactively. I mean, I'm sorry, the page can push information to the database, which can then be used at later times for other things. So in this case, you're using the listing to redisplay and saving things immediately. It's a very cool technique, not hard to do. So thanks for posting that. All right, we are 4 minutes over our hour, so I'm going to call it there. Thank you all for joining us for Low-Code Campfire for today. Hang around for a few minutes. We will go into our Afterglow session momentarily.